the CC from that. That's okay. Sorry. Thank you. That's fine, just leave it. So we'll begin. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Reading from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chapter 2, text 6 to 9. Brahma Atma Bhagavan Anuvadatina Anga Prabha Amsa Swarupatina Videya Chinna. Impersonal Brahman, the localized Paramatma, and the personality of Godhead are three subjects, and the glowing effulgence, the partial manifestation, and the original form are their three respective predicates. Anuvada age pache videya shtapana, sei artaka hishuna shastra vivarana. A predicate always follows its subject. Now I shall explain the meaning of this verse according to the revealed scriptures. Swayam Bhagavan Krishna Vishnu Paratattva Purna Jnana Purnananda Parama Mahatva. Krishna, the original form of the personality of Godhead, is the summum bonum of the all-pervading Vishnu. He is all-perfect knowledge and all-perfect bliss. He is the supreme transcendence. Nanda Sutta Bali Yandre Bhagavate Gai Sei Krishna Avartina Chaitanya Goshani. He whom Srimad Bhagavatam describes as the son of Nanda Maharaj has descended to earth as Lord Chaitanya. Purport. According to the rules of rhetorical arrangement for efficient composition in literature, a subject should be mentioned before its predicate. The Vedic literature frequently mentions Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, and therefore these three items are widely known as the subjects of transcendental understanding. But it is not widely known that what is approached as the impersonal Brahman is the effulgence of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's transcendental body. Nor is it widely known that the Supersoul or Paramatma is only a partial representation of Lord Chaitanya, who is identical with Bhagavan himself. Therefore, the descriptions of Brahman as the effulgence of Lord Chaitanya, the Paramatma as his partial representation, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna as identical with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu must be verified by evidence from authoritative Vedic literatures. The author wants to establish first that the essence of the Vedas is the Vishnu Tattva, the absolute truth, Vishnu, the all-pervading Godhead. The Vishnu Tattva has different categories, of which the highest is Lord Krishna, the ultimate Vishnu Tattva, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita and throughout the Vedic literature. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the same Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is described as Nanda Sutta, the son of King Nanda. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that Nanda Sutta has again appeared as Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he bases this statement on his understanding that the Vedic literature concludes there is no difference between Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This the author will prove. If he thus proved that Sri Krishna is the origin of all tattvas, truths, namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan, then there is no difference between Sri Krishna and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It will not be difficult to understand that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also the same origin of all tattvas. The same absolute truth as he is revealed to students of different realizations is called Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pascharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hey Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnanebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I will read the last verse, text 9 again, the translation. He whom Srimad Bhagavatam describes as the son of Nanda Maharaj has descended to earth as Lord Chaitanya. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he has described from texts 6 to 7, he was explaining that the impersonal Brahman, the localized Paramatma, and the personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, are the three subjects, and he explained them in terms of how they are understood in scriptures. And he mentions later on in text 7 that a predicate always follows its subject. And he says, now I shall explain the meaning of this verse according to the revealed scriptures. He also talks about this subject and predicate later on in text between 67 and 70, or maybe between 74 and 78, where he explains, and Prabhupada also explains in the purport that this is Sanskrit grammar according to the rhetorical rule in Ekadashi Tattva. It's Sanskrit grammar, but we can see all other, English and all other languages also follow the format of writing. And basically it means that if a sentence has got two parts, the subject, which is known to the reader, should be stated first, and the predicate is the second part of the sentence which explains the subject. And this part is not known to the reader, it explains the subject, and it has to come after the subject. So there's three parts to the sentence, three rules to writing a sentence in that format. And he gives the example, for example, in a common way we would say, like, my family eats dinner together or have dinner together. My family, that is a known subject. We all know who my family members are. But what is not known about the family is that we have dinner together. So that explains about the family. He also gave an explanation, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami gives the example of the Vipra, or this Vipra is a learned man. Again, the subject here is Vipra. Vipra is a Brahmana, and it's understood what a Vipra is. But his erudition, that he is a learned person, is not known. So that comes secondary. And he brings this up because he is trying to establish that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, and that these three different aspects, impersonal Brahman, and Paramatma are all part of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He also brings on later on in the chapter where he says that Sutta Goswami, when he read the Srimad Bhagavatam and when he was reading the different incarnations, he found that while it's mentioning different incarnations in the Bhagavatam, it seems to say that Krishna was one of them, and he was a little bit perplexed by this. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is saying, well, after studying the way the sentences was written, he could see that this is how it should be understood. By understanding the way it is written, it would reveal the real meaning of it. For instance, for the matter, the sentence Sutta Goswami was reading was Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa, which means these incarnations are plenary portions or parts of plenary portions of the Supreme Person. So Ete, these incarnations would be the subject, are the plenary portions or parts of the plenary portions of the Supreme Person would be the predicate. It is explaining this subject. And then the next sentence goes, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, that Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. Again, Krishna is the subject. Him being the original personality of Godhead is the predicate. And so when we try, and he's explaining by trying to understand this, that these incarnations, put them together, and these incarnations are plenary portions and portions of the Supreme Person, but who is that Supreme Person is not understood, and therefore it is explained in the next line that Krishna is the Supreme Person. If it was any other way around, if Narayan was the Supreme Person and the source of Krishna, it would have stated that, but it says Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So he wanted to establish the fact that all the incarnations that are described in the Bhagavatam have their source in Krishna. So back to this particular verse, he's trying to say that the impersonal Brahman is the subject, and the predicate is, he's the Anga Prabha. That is in the verse itself, the Anga Prabha. He's the impersonal Brahman. That the super soul is the Amsa, plenary portion, and the Bhagavan is the Swarupa, the predicate. So by explaining this, he's trying to, he will carry on in the rest of the next few chapters, trying to establish how Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is Krishna himself, and by establishing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the source of all the other incarnations that we know about or written about. And then he also goes to so anyway, that is the part of the Sanskrit. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, but just trying to explain or just trying to understand how the grammar in Sanskrit is explained. It's amazing, like small subtle things are there's so much in the in just how the words are arranged in Sanskrit verses, and it gives more meaning than just the words put together. It's fascinating. In this particular chapter 2 is also where Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is going to elaborate on the third of his 14 Mangala Charana. We know that the first and the second Mangala Charana was described or discussed in the first chapter. The first Mangala Charana he was paying his obeisances to the 6 diversities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is, first, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord, his expansion, his incarnation, his internal potency, and his marginal potency represented by a liberated marginal potency. So the Lord is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. The expansion is Lord Nityananda Prabhu, followed by his internal his avatar, his incarnation, which is Advaita Acharya, Vishnu. Internal potency, Gadadhar, and Srivas, marginal potency. He's paying his all of these six are, in a way, he's actually saying that God, person, does not exist alone, like it is understood in many other faiths, but God exists with his expansions, with his energies, with his devotees. He doesn't exist alone. So when Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami is paying his obeisance, it's God and all of the other features of God, which is none different from him, and different from him. Then he goes on to the second verse of the Mangala Charana, where he is paying his obeisances to Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu. He says that they have arisen simultaneously like the sun and the moon on the horizon of Gauda to benedict the people by dissipating the ignorance that is there. So the first two verses are explaining, he's paying his obeisances to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, but then the question may be asked, well, who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and why him? So this is where the third verse of the Mangala Charana, which he elaborates in the next few chapters, where he is talking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none other than Krishna himself. And so in that verse of the third Mangala Charana, the translation says, what the Upanishads explain as impersonal Brahman is none other than the bodily effulgence of God. And then he speaks that the Paramatma feature is the plenary portion of the Supreme Person. And Bhagavan is that person who has all the six opulences in full. And then he, in the last part of that verse, he says, well, that person is none other than Krishna himself. And this truth, there's no truth superior or equal to him. So this is the explanation of the third verse, and he will try to elaborate this further as he goes along. So he says that the Supreme Person is Krishna himself, who has come as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. In the introduction, Srila Prabhupada talks about how the Upanishads, when they describe the absolute truth, they always describe the absolute truth in a very impersonal view. But we also know that that is not quite true. Although it's explained that way, it is sometimes impersonalists would accept that view. I'll go on to that later. But we know from the Ishopanishad in the 15th verse that it is stated, Hiran Manyena Patrena, that the prayer is that we request that Krishna, please remove your golden veil that is covering you so that we could see you in person. So that Brahman effulgence is actually the bodily rays of Krishna, and it's covering him. We can't quite see him, so we request him to remove that so that we could see him in person. And Prabhupada goes on to explain that this Brahman realization, this Brahman energy, it's not denied. It's not that it doesn't exist. It does exist, but it's only a small part of the Supreme Person. And he, elsewhere he has explained that the Mayavadis or the impersonalists are very much drawn to the Brahman effulgence because they find varieties in the material life very painful, because they find if the way they understand it is relationships or things or attachments, they are all causing so much pain. So they find relationships painful to deal with. They find having any kind of, all kinds of suffering is due to some kind of attachment we have to things or people or our ideas or our way of thinking. So they find, surely when I have forego all of this and I have reached my destination, there can't be any of this. There can't be any of this variety. They find this variety actually painful. So they keep having this mantra, or this, that they try and analyze things, nati, not this, this can't be it, this can't be it. Is because they want to get to a point where there would be no variety. And they fail to see that when they reach, or the ultimate place is a place full of variety, full of different kinds of various relationships that are experienced in full love, and it is possible. They cannot see beyond that, and they always give this analogy of a water pot. Prabhupada says that is a very typical example that they would give. A water pot, a clay water pot, when it is empty, it makes a lot of noise. But when it's full with water, it's very quiet. So what they're trying to say is they would prefer to fill themselves with understanding and not talk and everything. And therefore, they would try and minimize their speech or conversation or any kind of interaction to avoid any kind of entanglement in the material world. But Prabhupada says that that's not a very good example. First of all, there's hardly any similarity between a water clay pot and a human being. One is dead matter and the other is a living being. And a living being is something that needs to interact. It needs human other interaction, so it's impossible. And secondly, he also says that a devotee, once they realize about the ultimate goal, doesn't mean they even have to reach there just yet, but even if they realize there's the ultimate place, excuse me, ultimate place, like a place full of variety, and this place of variety is the relationships are full of love, and that relationship begins when we have that relationship with the Supreme Person, Krishna. When that happens to somebody, they can't stop talking. They can't stop telling people, or they can't stop thinking about it, because it's a place that they want to tell themselves, they want to tell everybody there's something to look forward for, that is more to what's happening here. So Vaishnav begins to really speak when they do have this understanding that there is so much more in the spiritual world, and it's blissful. It's out of pure love, and there's variety. Everything is conscious, and it's somewhere they want to go, and they want to tell everybody about it. So that is the difference between. Thank you, Dhruva. So that's the difference between a Vaishnav and a Mayavadi. And from Srila Prabhupada's pranam, when we say Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prashtarine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. So Namaste Saraswati Devi, here is a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Gauravani Prashtarine, he's bringing the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gaura Vani Pracharine, he's going to be preaching the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nirvisesha Sunyavadi, Nirvisesha, to eliminate, to get rid of Nirvisesha, impersonalism, and Sunyavadi, voidism. So where he's bringing it to Paschatya Deshatarine, in the Western countries. And like I said earlier, it's not that the impersonalism doesn't exist. It does exist, and it was actually even it began. Buddha himself, an incarnation of Krishna, descended to propagate Buddhism, impersonalism, and we do acknowledge that when we sing Keshava Tirtha Buddha Sarira Jaya Jagadisha Hare, so we do acknowledge that Buddha did that, and Shankaracharya is an incarnation of Shiva who came about, who propagated Mayavadi philosophy. So they did come, but they had a purpose. and they've done the job, and now it's, Krishna has a plan to bring it back to personalism, and therefore he comes again as we had Ramanujacharya, we had Madhvacharya bringing back the personalist view of God, and then Prabhupada, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says how to do it, and then Prabhupada is bringing this to the West, where impersonalism and voidism, atheism is prominent. And so this is how the sequence of events, and it's the plan, because to understand, in many other kinds of faith, to understand God is great, that's good, and that is a great stepping stone. But to go beyond that, to understand how is he great, in what way is he great, and what does it mean to say God is great, what is he capable of doing, and there's this is something Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought, because he's showing how God is great and in what way he is great, and he's also saying that you can have various relationships with him, and this is something there's no scripture in the world talks about. There's no scripture in the world that says that God can actually play the role as your son, or God can play the role as your friend or as your lover. So that is not there, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought that to show how it is possible to have relationship with a person God, not an impersonal energy. So what he's brought is extremely high understanding, and it's available for everybody. And in that way, he gives a lot of information about how, the very definition of God, what it means to be in his place, how, and by his personal example, when he came in a garb of a devotee. He came as to show us how to worship Krishna. So he came in a covered form. So he showed us how to do it, and the nature of the relationships, what are the obstacles that one will face, with the case of like Haridas Thakur, and different kind of problems one will face, the pitfalls and the obstacles, the nature of the relationships, how should devotees deal with each other. All of that is very much described in his example, in his life, and that is what Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Madhya and the Antya Leela will speak about. So so there's a lot Krishna Kaviraj Goswami is going to explain in the further, and it'll be very exciting. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to explain that there is a wide variety of different kinds of worship, but in the end of the day, he says, well, give it all up, surrender unto to me. Krishna says that, and in this age, it is chanting of his names, and he invested everything in his names. So when he says Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Namaiva Kevalam Kala Nasteva 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 Gatiranyata, that there is no other method in this age than having to call out for him with his names, and prayer. When we are praying for Krishna, when we are calling out for Krishna's name, it is like because his name is so potent. When we are calling for Krishna, it is like it's like a direct hotline. It's like you're having a direct access to Krishna, and sometimes we usually tend to pray. We pray when we are suffering, or when we have just various difficulties. But suffering itself is a form of suffering sometimes prolonged, and it usually is because even while we are praying, and the suffering is prolonged because we haven't, in our heart, we haven't arrived at a place where it is softer, it's pliable, where it's cleaner, so that Krishna could reveal the wisdom we need to overcome the suffering. And so that's why sometimes suffering is it's there. It's a lesson. It's there to teach us something, and it is something that we have to embrace. And the more we distance ourselves from it, the suffering actually prolongs itself, and it is we have to actually embrace it, to say, ultimately, to have faith that this kind of lessons do come with a price, and the suffering is intended to teach us those lessons. Sometimes the causes of those lessons is difficult to identify, and sometimes it's easy, and it's most of the time is because when we carry on with our daily lives without much introspection, without looking inwards. And I had a very nice conversation recently, and it's the fact that prayers, when we are going through a difficult time and we are praying, it is the time when we are in commune one-to-one with Krishna, with God. And at that time, when we can start to accept, and usually, the discussion is even though when you have, you could be in a group or in a surrounding where everybody's around you, but at the point of suffering, you're pretty much alone. So the internal dialogue is very much between you and Krishna on your own. And the more we realize that the internal dialogue is alone and try and embrace it, the more we actually start looking forward to it, because it is in a way just you and him, and you and him, and trying to deal with this issue, and you're going to try and overcome it. And in the same way, that's why Queen Kunti, when she prays for difficulties, because that brings her to a place of having an internal dialogue with Krishna, that she can always think about him and have a conversation and find out what is the lesson in all this, and why, and how do we overcome it. Suffering is always there to, this place is a world of suffering, and is always there to remind us that we don't belong here. And that's why it is arranged in such a way. But beyond prayer, praying for help, praying for our necessities is good, but praying for courage, praying to understand things, praying to persevere during difficult times, is also another need for prayer. But beyond prayer, again, then we have praise, we have glorification. Glorification of God comes from a place where we have gratitude, when we are feeling completely grateful for everything we're going through, the good and the bad times, because we can see that despite all the difficulties, He's given us so much to work with. That is our mind, our intelligence, our ability to reason, to overcome this problem. So we are extremely grateful for all of that. So we glorify, and this glorification is and the prayer and the glorification we do is so that we want to constantly be on the move. Our soul shouldn't be stagnant in a place. We want to constantly move from one place to another place to another place. And I don't mean physically, but I mean more of our conscious awareness of what's going on. How do we approach God? What are the lessons we have to? We want to be constantly on the move. As soon as we are stagnant, we are practically dead, although in a living body. So when we are constantly in the move, we pray to be detached from our past mental judgments or preconditions or our ideas or what we think life should be about. And this idea of getting rid of attachment and to this material, it is not something that is only unique to Vaishnavism. It is unique to many other different faiths. And so I thought I will tell a story from Rumi, which is a Sufi Islam story, which I thought, although we have a lot of similar stories in the Bhagavatam, which I will draw parallels to, but I thought it's nice to just bring in something to show that this is also there in other faiths. The story goes about King Kafur. The title of the story is The Witch of Kabul. He is a king who has been, who spent most of his life he analyzes his thoughts, he analyzes his source of suffering, he analyzes what is happiness. He's like a jnani. He's constantly aware of how his inner mind, his inner workings are happening, and how, other than just having to run the kingdom, he was very much aware of his inner self. And one day he had a terrible dream. He had a terrible dream that his only son, Taufik, he had a terrible dream that the son died, and he was in so much grief in the dream that he felt like he was almost going to die in the dream itself because it was so painful. And he woke up from the dream thinking, oh, okay, so I better get him married and make sure we have an heir, and so that everything can be fine. That was his thinking, very practical, and he wanted to make sure everything was working fine. Taufik himself, as a personality, he was very much like his father. Although a prince, he was not interested in enjoying the opulence that come with being in that kind of position. He wasn't interested in enjoying or having alliances with different women, or he wasn't interested in any of that. In fact, he was very, very careful. On the side of the story, another character in the story, her name is Aliya. Aliya is a 90-year-old woman. She's an interesting character. It's a 90-year-old woman who has wrinkles and who's really ugly. I mean, she was so ugly. But although her body is 90, her wrinkles were like the neck of a very old camel. If you've seen those lines, she has it all over her face, and her body may be very old, but her heart is young and her desires were raging. She wanted to really enjoy. So she couldn't give it up, and so she constantly tried to beautify herself. So she would apply different kind of oils to her gums so that the teeth hopefully would start growing, and she put different kind of hair coloring on her hair to make sure that it looks nicer. And then she would and she's heard about the Quran. I mean, she's heard about how great the Quran is, but instead of spending her time trying to read it and contemplating on what is in the Quran is like she took out the pages of the Quran and took out strips of paper and stuck it to her face with rice glue to hide all the wrinkles, and she was really hideous looking. And she tried, she thought she looked okay, and she went to, Taufik was riding through the city. Now at this time, Taufik was riding through the city, and she realized, he could see what her intentions were straight away, and so he just rode past her. He didn't give her any attention. And then she realized, oh, she's got to do something more than this. So she actually went to Iblis, the devil, and asked him, please help me. I need to look beautiful again. I need my youth back and my beauty and everything. And Iblis was so disgusted, so horrified by looking at her. He even tried to preach to her, you should give up lust, like, what are you doing? You're 90 years old. I mean, usually a devil would try and tempt you to do more, but looking at her state, he was like, just give it up. He was so totally disgusted by her appearance. And he said, well, I can't give you any beauty or use. I know you're constantly nagging me on this, but I can't give it to you. But I'll give you this golden dust that if you throw it on somebody, they would have the illusion that you are actually beautiful and everything around you is actually beautiful. And she's like, okay, I can do that. So in the meantime, the story goes that Kafur, he's arranging for a marriage for his son, and knowing what his son is like, he wasn't looking to find a princess from a faraway country with lots of money and prestige. He actually looked for a daughter of an ascetic, of a sage from the countryside, and she had abundance of good virtues, and and she was beautiful as well. But that was the kind of girl he wanted to arrange for Taufik, and Taufik was very happy to accept that offer. So while he was riding the horse towards the city to meet his father and his future bride, Aliya managed to sprinkle this powder on Taufik. And as soon as that happened, he reined in his horse and he stopped, looked at her, and totally fell for a shy, coquettish laughter, and thought that she was the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. He got off the horse, followed her, and she led him to her house, and suddenly everything that he was seeing, it was like beautiful gardens, soft grasses, and her house was so beautifully decorated, when all it was is a hut, like she was very poor. There was nothing there. But he lived very, very happily. And when the father later on heard what happened, he was totally devastated, totally in despair that he lost his son. And he tried many ways to send different people to talk him out of it. Can you see what it is that you've married to? Can you see what it is? And Taufik was saying, oh, you're just very superficial. You're just interested in having really good looks and extremely rich person, but you can't see the beauty in this woman that I'm with, and he just couldn't understand this. So anyway, I'm going to cut the story short now. So what happened in the end was somehow a different sequence of events, and the curse got broken. Taufik returns to his father after a year, and totally regretting what he has done, but he accepts it. And the story is that in the stories of Rumi, written by Rumi, these characters, they sometimes symbolize something, and sometimes they have different moral stories behind it. So with King Kafur, what we learn is, although he was extremely attentive to his thoughts, he was attentive to his mind, what he wasn't attentive to is his degree of attachment he had for his son. It was unexamined and unmeasured. It was just, he didn't see to the degree he was attached that, okay, my son fell for a old hag, but I fell for despair. I fell into this illusion of thinking that you are ultimately, my son forever, and that you have your own path, and that is something he realized that he fell for, and that was the degree of, that was the source of his suffering. So again, attachment is something we in Vaishnava literature, we have always we've always been told is a source of problem, and in Buddha. Buddha would say that the root of our suffering is our attachment. Attachment means material attachment, anarthas, not attachment to spiritual activities, but unnecessary attachment. And it is not just things or people, it's also our judgments of how things should be, and those kind of attachments. And even in Islam, a caliph would say, and that it is not that we attachment is not about getting rid of things. It is not about not wanting to own things. It is to make sure that those things don't own you. And even in an Australian Aboriginal proverb, it says that we are all passing through. We are just here going through different experiences. We are here to observe, to learn, to really love truly. And once we are done with those lessons, then we go home, back home. That is the proverb, and it's so it is there in every phase to show that attachment is a real attachment to unimportant material things are binding us here. With Taufik, now Taufik's lessons were quite interesting. Again, he was also very pious and he was trying to do the right thing. But the lesson we can learn from his life is inattentiveness. As he was riding through the city, he was thinking about getting married to his wife from a faraway place, and he was thinking about all of that, how it's going to be. He was not attentive to what's happening, and therefore the lesson is that even in our path, in our spiritual path, we have to be very attentive to any kind of distractions. There are thousands of distractions that will be thrown on our path, and we have to be very diligent to see what they are. And the same lesson is there for Taufik. But in the case of Taufik, some people would argue, okay, but he wasn't aware that this was going to happen. So the other lesson was that sometimes we don't know what is the cause of a suffering. We don't know where it came from or why it came from. So the thing is, with Taufik, he has shown by example that to take it as a blessing and to learn from it, whatever it may be or wherever it may have arrived, but what is the lesson in it? Aliyah, for the old woman, she symbolizes illusion, that Maya has the ability to make the ugly look beautiful, make the ugly look desirable. I mean, it's matter, but she makes matter look so interesting that you are drawn to it. And so she represents that. But as a person, she also represents problems that we all have. That is that as we are growing older, as we grow much older, the mistake she's done is that she wasn't prepared for her old age. She wasn't preparing for her old age. She was not embracing her old age. She could see like the body is dying, but instead of saying that, okay, the body is dying, where is my next position? What is my next destination? That I should be paying attention to the soul within me. She didn't do that. She just kept on giving attention to the body, and that is a mistake all of us do. And we have to realize that she was thinking by all of different kind of methods of trying to beautify herself, that she was going to try and cheat death, cheat old age, cheat decay, but we can't. It's coming and it's approaching, and it's the quicker we realize that this is temporary and that we have to do something quickly, we would be in a better place. So I just wanted to bring this story in to show that that these ideas are also there in other faiths, and just as we do in our in Srimad Bhagavatam, we have even Hiranyakashipu. When Hiranyaksha died, in the funeral, when all his wives and children and family were grieving, he gives the philosophy that this body is temporary and what you shouldn't be attached to. And again, we know, friend, there was another death in the house of Srivas Thakur when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was having his kirtan, that he brought the boy back to life, and again the boy was able to speak about how temporary this body is and that he is passing through, and not to be attached to him, although he is a son of one of the ladies. So we all have those experiences to show that this life is extremely transient. It's changing all the time, and we shouldn't be attached to it. So to have to get rid of a material attachment, like I said, we are souls. We need to be attached to something else. It's not possible to be attached to nothing, to some form of energy. It's not possible, but it is possible to be rid of our material attachment if we have our attachment to a supreme person, which is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to show us how to do. And what it means to have that attachment, and how inattentiveness and not to underestimate inattentiveness is a problem, will become a problem, and how to not underestimate illusion, Maya, how she's able to convince us in so many ways to draw us back to the material world. And we can and prayer is the other point I wanted to finish with, the prayer and praise. Praise is something that again is there in all other faiths. In Christianity, this Gospels are a huge thing. In Sikhism, it is in the heart of their mode of worship is singing. In Sufism, they take delight in singing, singing, and so is in Vaishnavism. We have a bhajana, we have a kirtana, we sing and we call, because sound is the most subtlest thing, and we are calling him from that place, from our heart. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, well, the easiest form, there's many varieties, but the easiest form is to call his names. And so we have the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I will end it here, and thank you so much. I hope you had a very nice Kartik month. It was full of festivals. There were so many programs, and also that it was a time to take some kind of rata, some kind of austerity, and it all makes it sweeter. That's a small thing I just remembered, but a long time ago when there was a survey done on all the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides in Malaysia, and they wanted to find out what was your most amazing experience, and they said it was the time when they were punished to do extra sit-ups, or do extra walk an extra mile, or to do something different, and anything that was strenuous, and they struggled with it mentally and physically. They said that was quite memorable. And in the same way, I just wanted to say that sometimes when we take on extra difficulties, it makes that time extra special, because we know that it's stretching us, it's stretching our minds, it's stretching our limits, and it's ultimately good for us. Anyway, I hope you had a nice Damodar month, and thank you for listening. Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai.